People who slept with their teachers. How did it happen? I had a teacher. She was older, but she used to wear these short skirts. I would just be distracted all through the lessons. Then one day, she called me out for my being so distracted, and I just blurted it out. It was risque, you know, but it was out. She kind of took over the seduction from there. There wasn't any sort of problem finding a place for all the illicit activity, because I guess that's the advantage of being homeschooled and all. I always knew I was smart, and so did my family, but I hated school and never considered going to college. I was barely making it after a year into attending an Ivy League I couldn't afford to go to, coming from a big family with rogue parents. I thought you only had to sign up for student aid once when you started attending. So when my sophomore year rolled around, after a tough summer of doing construction, I couldn't sign up for classes right away, even though I was accepted to be an RA in the dorms. Once I could, I had slim pickings and had to take this critical theory course that wasn't in my major. I showed up a week into it, and it was a 10-person class, tiny. So I had to introduce myself to everyone, and the professor, who was a total babe, wasn't sure I was supposed to be there, considering this class wasn't in my major. I proved I could handle the content, and she told me to stop by her office that afternoon to catch up on the course. I showed up, and she was shrewd with how I could make up the few assignments I missed. I noticed her shirt had a few more buttons undone than in class, and by now, wasn't thinking about the class at all. I told her my intentions. I wanted to bang her. She said, "What?" So I repeated my intentions. One thing led to another, and we were banging casually for a while. It was good. I like her a lot. We were at her place, and we were just laying in bed, when her husband comes home, who I did not know about, but it was cool, because they were in some sort of open relationship. It also turns out she had a son. I'll get to him. So I was hooking up with my professor, on the DL, with her husband's permission. How could things get better? How could things go wrong? I ended up having a lot of feelings for her, and that's where things go wrong. No, you never really think about how much someone means to you until you don't have them anymore. I fell in love with my professor, and became possessive, wanted to have her to myself. She had a husband, and that was already more than I could handle. Then I heard some rumor of her sleeping with another student. That was it. I was walking to her house when I saw some other guy walk out of her house, not knowing she had a son at that point, and not knowing that guy was, in fact, her son. I beat the living shit out of him. I was feeling everything deeply at this point and drank a lot. Things were already heading downhill when a picture of this professor naked in my bed leaked, and the university administration found out who was involved. Now, the picture, I later found out, was stolen from my phone from a jealous ex-girlfriend. Either way, the damage was done. She immediately cut ties with me, and I went into a complete mental breakdown and nearly drank myself to death. I certainly was mentally unwell for a while and walked to her house drunk to talk to her. She never did talk to me after that. I definitely learned my lesson. The summer between my first college year, I was 18, and spent the summer with a friend also 18 that lived on the lake. My English professor had a house near his. We met on the island where everyone went to swim. She asked if we wanted to stop by later that evening. Her husband only came down on the weekends. She had beer and whiskey. My friend stayed drunk all summer, and I got laid all summer. Best summer of my life. Due to how the school district in my hometown did things, I turned 18 in the middle of my junior year of high school, so I had a year and a half left of school as my own guardian. Well, at the start of the second semester, I took German for my language requirement. The teacher was the rather cute foreign exchange teacher from Denmark. She was 23 to my 18. For most of the quarter, she and I kept it as a student-teacher dynamic, until she got curious about how I could be spot-on perfect speaking German, but my spelling and sentence structure just looked like I was writing a fake, made-up language. Turns out I had dyslexia, so she started spending more and more time with me after class and school. Towards the end of that quarter, she and I were alone in the classroom after school when I got a complicated paragraph written without any mistakes. She was so happy that she leaned over my shoulder and went to kiss my cheek. I was startled when she leaned over and turned towards her, and we kissed on the lips. That led to a more deep and intimate kiss than either of us expected. We both tried to pass it off as an innocent mistake until one weekend she drove past me walking someplace by myself and stopped and asked me if I wanted a ride. I said sure. I was a horny teenager, and like I said, she was cute. I never made it to where I was going. She and I spent a long time in her car, kissing and fondling each other. She then said in a shy voice that we shouldn't be doing this, but if I wanted to, we could go to her apartment and carry on what we were doing there. I said yes. Once we got to her place and the door was shut, our clothes came off in a hurry, and I had the most incredible sex in my short life. We had a 6-month affair till she had to go back to Denmark to teach English there. I still fondly remember those 6 months, as she taught me a lot about both German and sex. Yes, I have. He was my lab professor for Intro to Environmental Science, and he was a 29-year-old virgin. I was 20. This was a year ago. I was single at the time. Wrote him an email about class, and then accidentally sent another one to him meant for someone else saying we should get together. He answered me on another email account that he would, in fact, like to go out. I met him, and we hooked up for almost 2 months. It didn't end well. He dumped me because we found out he knocked me up. When I say dumped, I mean it. He dropped an envelope in my mailbox with $500 in it with a note saying, "Get rid of it," and never answered one text or call. I ended up miscarrying, but never told him. Still to this day, he randomly texts me and asks if I had the kid. As wrong as it may seem, I have ignored him ever since. No one should be treated that way. I was hurt, confused, upset, and stressed for months. I did an AMA on this months ago, but it didn't get much notice. If you have any questions, please ask me before downvoting based on my synopsis. I had hooked up with my geography teacher. She always paid special attention to me, and one day she caught me staring at her boobs as any 18-year-old would do, and she smiled at me. So one day she gave me an after-school detention for failing to complete homework to a satisfactory standard. It was an hour of me and her in her office. She wasn't wearing a bra this time and showed me her chest. In return, she asked to touch me. I didn't say no. We ended up hooking up in her office. No real consequences as I finished the class maybe 3 months later and she left my school. Haven't seen her since. She announced in assembly she was leaving. I banged my high school history teacher. She was actually a substitute because my actual teacher died of some disease. On the very last day of my senior year, she asked me to stay after class. So I did, and she just started to make out with me. I was 18, and she was about 24. We eventually started doing it on her desk. After about 5 minutes, someone knocked on the door. I don't know how they knew we were in there, but we both escaped through the window, and I drove her to her apartment, where we continued to do it. Twice. We then dated for about 2 years. And then she moved away. The school never found out who was fucking in that classroom.